unexamined life is not worth living, Plato says in line 38a of the Apology. How do you examine yourself? What happens when you interrogate yourself? What happens when you begin to call into question your tacit assumptions and unarticulated presuppositions and begin then to become a different kind of person? See, I put it this way, that for me, philosophy is fundamentally about our finite situation. And we can define that in terms of we're beings toward death. At the same time, we have desire. Why we are organisms in space and time, and so it's desire in the face of death. And then, of course, you've got dogmatism, various attempts to hold on to certainty, various forms of idolatry. And you've got dialogue in the face of dogmatism. And then, of course, structurally and institutionally, you have domination. And you have democracy. You have attempts of people trying to render accountable elites. So philosophy itself becomes a critical disposition of wrestling with desire in the face of death, wrestling with dialogue in the face of dogmatism, and wrestling with democracy, trying to keep alive very fragile democratic experiments in the face of structures of domination. Takes tremendous discipline, takes tremendous courage to think for yourself, to examine yourself. That Socratic imperative of examining yourself requires courage. You know, William Butler Yeats used to say, it takes more courage to examine the dark corners of your own soul than it does for a soldier to fight on the battlefield. Courage to think critically. You can't talk. Courage is the enabling virtue for any philosopher, for any human being, I think, in the end. Courage to think, courage to love, courage to hope. Plato says philosophy is a meditation on and a preparation for death. And by death, what he means is not an event, but a death in life, because there's no rebirth, there's no change, there's no transformation without death. And therefore the question becomes, how do you learn how to die? And of course, Montaigne talks about that, his famous essay, to philosophize is to learn how to die. You can't talk about truth without talking about learning how to die. So that we're really talking about truth as a way of life, as opposed to simply truth as a set of propositions that correspond to a set of things in the world. Human beings are unable to ever gain any monopoly on truth, capital T. We might have access to truth, small t, but they're fallible claims about truth. We could be wrong. We have to be open to revision and so on. So there is a certain kind of mystery that goes hand in hand with truth. There you talk about truth being tied to the way to truth. Because once you give up on the notion of fully grasping the way the world is, you're going to talk about what are the ways in which I can sustain my quest for truth. But there are all ways of acknowledging our finitude and our fallibility.